Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV and of the 80s and 90s and ask the question...
Does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood?
My name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And you'd think after 44 times that I'd get that correct.
Nope.
We're still working on the intro, apparently. Today, we are in the middle of our Halloween spooky cycle. So we just did the Real Ghostbusters, the cartoon.
Yep. And now, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Which Steve is...
The series.
If you can't tell, Steve is very excited about this.
Yes.
Our live action TV pick. And then after that is another Steve pick for the movie...
Monster Squad.
Cult classic from the 1980s.
Yep.
So we have that to look forward to. So you can find Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show... Not the movie. We're not really going to talk about that too much today.
No.
You can find that on Hulu. And I think you can buy it on Amazon Prime as well.
Probably.
Find that. But before we get into Buffy, we have an unusual snack today.
Our first segment are non-sponsored snacks.
Yes.
And in case anyone's out there and you're listening and you hear one of these snacks that we review... It's not sponsored, but we're open.
Yeah, we're open to sponsorship.
Like, if you want to throw money our direction, or you're pitching a snack, like, hey, we're open to it. DM us on Facebook
Especially if it's gluten-free.
Right.
Because then I can have it, too. So, today's snack, we wanted to go with the whole vampire theme. And so, we're doing wax lips.
I guess.
A treat on Halloween, usually with fangs.
This was a Megan pick, and I'm not... sold on it. But we'll see.
Let me tell you, Steve.
I don't... This is the issue. I don't view wax lips as a snack as much as, like, part of a disguise or part of a Halloween outfit.
Well, they're not supposed to be an outfit, and they really were... I'll tell you about the history, because they really were meant for snacks. And they do have sugar in them. So, and artificial colors and flavors. So, 1859 is don't swallow it. It's paraffin wax.
Well, what kind of snack am I supposed to not swallow?
It's supposed to be like gum.
This is crap.
I'm going to bleep you.
Nope.
1859 is the birth of the oil industry. Kerosene illumination is changing the face of America. So American Petroleum floods in and gives light cheaper than a candle. Okay? 1859. Eventually, what happens is that you have this byproduct of kerosene distillation, and that's paraffin wax. So it comes usually either clear or white paraffin wax, and essentially tallow candles had been used for the most part, and paraffin starts replacing things for sealing wax and even in chewing gum. By the 1900s. Crayola crayons use this with paraffin and wax cylinders. And in Buffalo, New York, a confectioner becomes enamored by this idea that you could have some kind of paraffin product for a snack. And his name is John Glenn, not the astronaut.
Not the astronaut.
He was,
no relation.
No relation. So he was born in 1888 in England. He grew up in his father's wholesale candy business. His father passed away in 1912. And basically he started producing these paraffin penny candy, like gum, chewing gum novelties that are just paraffin wax that you chew and then you eventually kind of spit out. And eventually this Glenn company employs about 100 people. And they start to, in the 1920s and 30s, they start to make these, first it was wax horse teeth that tasted like wintergreen.
Okay.
They eventually create these wax lips. They also are the same company that started Nickel Nips, which we had before, the little bottles, the wax bottles with the little stuff inside.
Right.
That we had earlier. I forget. Well, you can go back and listen to that. But these kind of, the wax lips eventually had a huge popularity in the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
That they were like a novelty thing. They have a bite plate on them. I took a picture of Steve and I might put it on Facebook if he lets me. They have a bite plate on them and they're whack-a-wax and they're supposed to be kind of funny. So the idea is like wear them now and then chew them up later. And mostly they grew in popularity when there was like, the horror genre started to really become popular and the teeth, like vampire teeth were on them and stuff like that. In the 1980s, the price of paraffin went from 7 cents to 50 cents a pound.
Whoa.
Because the oil shortage. So the product struggled, and in 1994 they closed, but basically they sold different pieces of their company off, and they sold part that sold bagged cotton candy, and they sold another part that had whatever, and these now are made, I think they're made by the same company that does Tootsie Roll.
Okay.
So it's kind of an interesting history that, came from just this kind of saying, what else could we do with this excess of paraffin wax? Let's mix it with sugar.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that there is a dentist website, and they have a blog all about different types of Halloween candy on the dentist website, and whether or not it's like, quote unquote good for you. And they said, use the wax lips as wax lips, but don't eat them, which we just did. Right. So because the wax apparently makes the sugar stick to your teeth. Oh. So it's worse than some other candies. For your teeth. So
this is I'm going to put in air quotes, snack that the oil industry put down.
Yeah.
Because the oil industry spiked, which means I'm assuming people were using paraffin wax for candles.
Yeah, they were.
So that made the price of the wax go up. Mm-hmm. And they were like, no, okay, we're done now. And then we'll just do Tootsie Rolls.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, so...
So I had a little bit of it. You had a little bit of it. What are your thoughts?
Okay. This is not my favorite.
No.
Okay. It does have, I guess, a fruity taste, sort of.
Kind of.
It smells a little bit like Fruit Loops, which is like a non-generic fruit. And the taste is not strong. And again, it's wax, so then you have to, you chew it, but then you can't swallow it, so you have to, take it out of your mouth or spit it out or whatever.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like gum, but it's not.
Yeah, so I have a strict rule with snacks. No swallow, no score.
That's
okay. And so I'm giving this a 1, which is the lowest, because I can't swallow it. What good of a snack is it?
Yeah, but it's also a novelty candy, so you are supposed to... Can I have the...
Even a bubble gum I can swallow if I feel like it.
Oh, gross. You don't want to do that.
You don't tell me how to eat my gum. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have to give it a 1, because I've spent my entire life without trying to eat wax lips. And I will go my entire rest of my life without doing it again. And I can't swallow it. So, but because of those things, I am giving it 1. I'm giving it 1 set of fangs.
I'm gonna give it. Okay, I'm gonna split my rating.
Okay.
So, my official rating is also a 1. This does not taste good. So we did say we were open to sponsorship, not for this, because we're not going to sell these. Yeah, it's still, I think there are still little pieces of wax on my teeth, which I don't enjoy. There's just not enough flavor. I don't know if they could add more to it, and it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. But in terms of the fun factor, I'm going to give it a 4, because this is pretty fun.
I also had no fun with it.
You don't have fun posing with the wax lips?
No,
so silly?
I didn't really pose as much as I put them on my mouth to see what it would be like, and you took a picture. Yeah. That's not posing.
You posed with them. It was so fun for you. You loved it. You were like, look at me. I'm a fancy man with my wax lips.
No, I wasn't.
When I put them in the picture that I took, I'll put up on ours too, and it looks like I've had very bad plastic surgery. So it's kind of funny. So, unfortunately, we rate the snack 1 out of 5. We're doing bats today because it's vampires. And 1 out of 5 for the snack and 1 out of 10 for the show. So, unfortunately, wax lips. 1 bat out of 5. What's wrong with you?
I forgot what you gave it.
One. I gave it a 1.
Scores.
I gave it a 1.
And then a 4 for fun.
But it's a 4 for
Nobody
fun, but my
cares
official
about that.
rating is a 1.
Okay, so let's do it again.
So...
Yeah! 1 bat out of 5. Yeah, not great.
Not great. Sorry, wax lips. You can pretend to be a lady with plastic surgery. You can pretend to be a vampire, depending on the kind you find. I wanted one with fangs, obviously, but I couldn't find it.
I never had wax ones. The fangs I had as a kid were the hard plastic
plastic?
ones. That you put them in and they were your top and bottoms.
Yeah.
But then they pinched the inside of your gums and cheeks.
Yeah, I had those too.
Because they were like sharp, hard plastic.
But you never had the wax kind either?
No.
Oh, we would get those every year. Like, somebody would put them in for our little Halloween.
Interesting.
Our little McDonald's Halloween buckets.
Who hated you that much?
Who liked me that much that was like, be a vampire, Megan?
Who hurt you on Halloween?
You know, one time my brother did find a pin in his candy.
Oh, that's like urban
We
legend.
had to check through all of our candy and because
Yeah.
of the urban legends and that. So you had to look through, and our parents made us. We would dump out the candy. We would look through each piece to make sure it was wrapped still. And one year he found one with a needle stuck through it.
That's crazy time.
And it sounds like I'm making that up, but I'm not. It's not like, hey, my second cousin told me that her brother. No, this is like legitimately. I believe that it was from an older person across the street from us who like did a lot of sewing. I don't think.
Unfortunately, it dropped something into a candy.
Yeah, and possibly also just was giving out whatever candy she could find.
That's
like
possible.
Hadn't bought, but it did. Yeah, it did happen, and it was kind of a little bit spooky.
It taught you guys a lesson to check your candy.
Yes, that is true. So, let's get into Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the show. Steve, can you give kind of an overview of what the show's about?
Okay. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is about Buffy Summers, who is a vampire slayer, or what they just call a slayer, which is a teenage girl who, when she reaches a certain age, is imbibed with power to fight monsters and vampires. So she's kind of super strong and super athletic. Mm-hmm. And she works with a watcher, who's an older gentleman, Giles, who kind of guides her and trains her. And then she ropes in a bunch of her friends during the series, and they call themselves the Scooby Gang, after Scooby-Doo.
Right.
And they basically help her doing research and things like that. So every episode is about her basically either looking for, finding, tracking a monster, and then killing it, basically. Different types of monsters. And there's some long-form storytelling that takes place through the 7 seasons that it has. But for most part, it follows that formula. It's a monster hunting show, basically.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, yeah, the history of this... We're going to start with, of course, Joss Whedon.
Yes.
This was interesting, and I did not know this until I researched it for the show, but his grandfather wrote for the Donna Reed show in the 1950s.
Oh, okay.
His father wrote for the Electric Company, Benson, and the Golden Girls. And his mother was a novelist and an English teacher as well.
So he was a legacy writer.
Yeah.
Which explains why he was so good.
Yeah.
Way better than a lot of writers we have now.
Yeah, you say that like he's deceased. He's not deceased.
No, I'm just saying, but we're looking at a thing he wrote in the 90s.
Yeah, that's true. So his parents were divorced. He went to boarding school and he studied film at Wesleyan, and then he moved out to California to writing. He worked in a video store and kind of like banged out some TV like spec scripts where you would submit a speculative episode for a show that was already on the air, and then they might hire you based on that script. It's not like that script is made. Mm-hmm. It's just like, here's like what I think the tone of your show is and stuff like that. And based on that, he got a job as a staff writer on Roseanne.
Nice. Wait a second. So I have a college degree in literature and writing.
Yeah.
And I worked at a video store. So I could have been Joss Whedon.
I mean, but then you wouldn't have Megan.
Right. Good call.
So
yeah.
Your life would be way worse.
That's true.
Also, he was born in 1964, so a little bit. But anyway, as a staff writer on Roseanne, he called the experience, quote, baptism by radioactive waste.
Wow.
It was apparently not just baptism by fire, because Roseanne had some mental health issues, but also she was very notorious for being like, that's funny, that's not, and like she would not cut anybody slack. If you weren't funny, like you were out of there.
Gotcha.
And had like pretty fairly high standards and kind of exacting for things like that. So the original idea came to him, I think, when he was in his video store days. He would watch these horror movies, and he said, there were always bubble-headed blondes wandering into dark alleys getting murdered by some creature. And he said, I'd love to see a movie in which a blonde wanders into a dark alley, takes care of herself, and deploys her powers. And so that is how the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer was born.
Okay, so Joss Whedon was attached to the movie as well.
Yeah, he wrote the movie.
That's interesting because
well,
when the show hit, the show is Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well. It's still called Buffy Summers. It's based a little bit off her, but it's canonically not connected to the movie at all.
Yeah, and that is because basically he saw what they did with his script and he didn't like it.
Yeah.
So they changed it quite a bit, and he was like, it's kind of what I had envisioned, but it wasn't quite there. Like, basically, he wanted it to be a little more, have a little bit more like the show, feminist themes, a little bit darker, and they wanted it to be more like funny and campy and like it's a cheerleader fighting vampires, ha 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 ha, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Also, the movie starred Christy Swanson and Luke Perry. R.I.P. Luke Perry. He seemed like a really nice guy.
Right.
Christy Swanson can't act.
No.
Everything I've ever seen her in, it is like she's reading the lines.
And they made the vampire. This was the issue. It's almost like they turned it more quirky.
Yeah.
And slapsticky, and they made the vampires kind of like, I think Paul Rubens was a vampire.
He was, yeah.
And they made it very like laughable, funny.
Yeah.
Instead of Buffy the Vampire Slayer was not like super horror, but the monsters and the vampires for the most part were intimidating of some sort in the show.
Yeah. So basically, after the movie, he did a few other things here and there, and the people who owned the rights said, we want to make this into a show. And they didn't have to approach him, but they ended up approaching him. Mm-hmm. Their original vision, which is interesting to me, is that they were going to have it be a half-hour show and kind of like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So again, it was going to be more for kids and more, like you were just saying, quirky and campy and kind of funny. Mm-hmm. And so they approached him and said, would you do a show? And he said, sure. And then he started developing these scripts that were much darker and made for an hour-long TV show. And that's basically how it became the show that it is, because of the changes that he made. Paul Rubens, by the way, as Steve mentioned, if you don't know, he also played Pee Wee Herman. That's what he's kind of known for.
Yep.
So and
we mentioned him in Flight of the Navigator.
Yes, we did, because he was the voice in Flight of the Navigator of the ship. So the WB network's budget basically wasn't great at first, but eventually that became it had better production values as they went along.
Right.
And it's supposed to be like post-camp, and it's sort of like other people compared it to Scream. Like a genre piece that kind of bends the genres, and it's self-referential. So they're calling it like the Scooby Gang.
Right.
Like they've seen the other stuff that we've seen.
Yes.
Right? And it's, like Steve said, it's a little bit horror, it's a little bit teen movie, it's a little bit fantasy. It's like, yeah, so it's an interesting mixture of those things. And then eventually, Joss Whedon went on to do some other things. He wrote Avengers.
Yep, worked on the Avengers
and Endgame.
I don't know exactly which pieces. Endgame, probably, yeah.
And then he also worked with DC.
He did, yep.
After Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
He did the...
he stepped in and worked, but partially on Justice League.
Justice League, right. So, also Sarah Michelle Gellar, when this came out, when Buffy came out, I was like, that's the girl from Swan's Crossing.
Okay.
There's this, like, teenage soap opera show that I was obsessed with, and next year we are going to be reviewing it.
Okay.
We're gonna watch Swan's Crossing, which launched Sarah Michelle Gellar's career.
Well, no, I think Buffy launched Sarah Michelle Gellar's career.
No, I mean as in the first thing that she really...
that was her first thing.
Yeah, that was one of the first things
as we're in the
she
history
did.
and stuff, let me say, one of the things that I really liked about this show, and we'll get into a bunch of stuff as we talk about the actual plots of the episodes we watched, but one of the things in general that I liked about this show with facts and history is this really launched or brought or put a spotlight on a lot of people. Okay? Sarah Michelle Gellar, as you said, she was Swan's Crossing, which I've never heard of in my life. Right? But Buffy the Vampire Slayer really propelled her. Okay?
Yeah, it
because
did.
she was the main star. It went 7 seasons and had a huge following.
Yeah.
Okay? Allison Hannigan, who hadn't really been, this was her first spotlight, and later she would go on to be in How I Met Your Mother.
And the American Pie movies.
American Pie movies,
Yeah.
right? David Boreanaz also ended up being in a number of other things after he was in this. He got his own spin-off show with Angel.
And then he was in Bones.
He was in Bones,
Okay.
right? So he ended up having a really good career, too. James Marsden, who played Spike, has been in a number of things as well. Okay? A lot of times it's more sci-fi fantasy stuff sometimes, but he's been in things, and he's actually a really good actor. In some of the later episodes, Michelle Trachtenberg, who plays Dawn, the sister, she ended up kind of getting propelled from this, and she was in a number of movies in like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, she did the one with the skating, the Ice Princess.
Yep, she was
Yeah.
also in, was it European Road Trip?
I don't know.
She was in some like teen, early 20s comedy films.
Yeah.
And she was in a couple things. Anthony Head, who plays Giles, is an excellent... He's a British actor. He's excellent. And he's been in a lot of other sci-fi fantasy stuff. He was in one of the Percy Jackson movies. He was in... obviously he was in Buffy. He was in Merlin. He was
The
in
show?
Yeah, the show Merlin. He was in one of the Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters. He actually, I think he replaced Pierce Brosnan's character in that.
Okay.
And so he was in The Canterville Ghost. He was in a number of sci-fi and fantasy kind of stuff, which was really cool. Oh, he played a bad guy in an episode of Doctor Who with David Tennant. And he's just really good, too. So you got Seth Green was in this.
Right.
And that kind of pushed his career more. Eliza Dushku was in this, and it was one of her major kind of roles.
Charisma Carpenter.
Nicholas Brendan, who played Xander. I don't recall seeing him in a lot of other stuff after this. But he was good. His character was likable. He was kind of goofy, but he was likable. And I thought he acted well, even in some, like we're going to talk about the musical piece.
So the reason that you haven't seen him is because you don't watch this show anymore, but he was in Criminal Minds for like 7 years. Yeah.
I watched Criminal Minds for a long time.
He played Kevin Lynch in Criminal Minds from 2007 to 2014.
Really?
Yeah, and he's done a few other things. Like he did a Children of the Corn movie. He did some looks like some like horror stuff, But yeah, he was in Criminal Minds for 21 episodes. It says so. Maybe it was just a recurring kind of role. He did recurring role on Private Practice.
Yeah, these are shows I wouldn't
really
watch.
And then he also, and same thing with James
Marsden.
They both do some voiceover stuff as well. So for video games and things like that. But yeah, I not maybe as big of a career, but certainly like a working actor.
The thing is that, I mean, these were all young actors, except for obviously Anthony Head, who was made to be an adult, right, to be a father figure. But these were all younger actors and actresses that were brought in. And now, watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the show, there's very rarely an episode where you're not like, oh, I know who that is.
Right.
Because they've now been in a lot of other things.
Yeah. I will also say, too, on the kind of darker side, apparently the actor that we were just talking about, Nicholas Brendon, he's had a number of arrests and some struggles with depression and then also substances.
Oh, that's sad.
So like arrest for like obtaining a prescription by fraud, assaulting people, that kind of thing, unfortunately. And he talked about that on Dr. Phil and like how he had struggled with it. So that might be why we haven't heard of him as much.
Like the kid from Flight of the Navigator.
Yeah. And thankfully he was able to overcome it. I think that Nicholas Brendon's kind of still going through it a little bit.
It's a shame because I think he's a good actor.
Yeah. And then we have kind of, just to briefly mention that the controversy with Joss Whedon, that he was kind of abusive on set and that yelled at his actors and fat shamed people who were pregnant and that kind of thing. I'm not laughing at the situation. I'm laughing because they're pregnant.
Right.
Like, don't fat shame people who are pregnant. That kind of thing. And he's basically, the only comments that he's made is just to say that earlier in his career that he might not have been the best person to work with. So it's not really it's not exactly a cancel culture situation, right? But it's more just how are people treated in Hollywood and how does that put stress on them and that kind of thing. Not
to defend it by any means, but to kind of think of it as a different perspective. I mean, he did learn from Roseanne.
That's true. Yeah, I mean... Yeah, and that's kind of how his career started, right? But he's at least admitted that, yeah, he might not have been the best person to work for, but the show is what the show is. A lot of people like it, and when we come back, we'll talk about our memories of the show, and then we'll get into our full review and recap. All right. I'm Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And we're going to talk about Buffy.
All right. You talk about your memories first.
Yeah, I didn't, this show came out in 97, and I was busy in 97.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think, depending on when it aired, I'm guessing it came out September 97, because that's typically when things premiere. I would have just started college. So... it just didn't, it wasn't really on my radar.
I'm Megan, and I'm a fancy, busy lady. That's you.
Well, my first year of college, I was in the dorms, I was in a sorority, I had double major, I was taking 20 credits, and I was editing the school newspaper and yearbook as well, doing different, section editing for that. And so, yeah, I had quite a bit going on at the time. So it just didn't, there's a lot of stuff that started around this time that I just wasn't on my radar. And I remember it when it came out that people were like, really? Like that horrible movie? Because the movie was not great.
The movie was not
I don't even think I've seen the whole movie. It's just by reputation, not a good movie. And maybe sometime we'll revisit it and see if it's as bad as people said.
Yeah.
But, I also feel, I know you're not going to like what I have to say here. I think that Sarah Michelle Gellar is beautiful. But she reminds me a little bit of Keanu Reeves in that, she always has, almost the same expression and tone no matter what the situation is. She's happy or she's sad or whatever. I don't know. The movies that she's done after this, and I know she took a lot of time off to be a mom as well because she and Freddie Prinze Jr. have been married for quite a while now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have 2 kids. They have a boy and a girl.
She's not obviously the star of the Scooby-Doo movies. Mm-hmm. She's there. She's pretty, but she's not. Daphne's not the star.
Well, it's an ensemble cast.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other movie that she did, Simply Irresistible, was there's not anything there. It's not,
She was in Cruel Intentions.
Yeah, but
and
she's
she played
not...
kind of the bad guy, and it was pretty well done.
Yeah, I guess. And
with Ryan Phillippe.
Yeah, Ryan Phillippe and Reese Witherspoon, but that's a whole other that's a whole other thing. So anyway, I didn't watch this in part because of those reasons.
Okay.
I did, however, watch it later on streaming. I've never seen the whole, like, 7 seasons. I'm not, it's all right. Yeah. I'm not super that into it. There are a couple episodes to me that are particularly memorable. There's one about school violence where there might be a school shooter and she can hear people's thoughts, and it's like a question of who it might be, and they start kind of suspecting a number of people because it was done maybe a year or two after Columbine. Mm-hmm. And that kind of sticks out in my memory as, like, I was glad that somebody was kind of talking about it and, like, how do we figure out who it is, or how do we help people? Because it wasn't a situation like, I want to go after the monster. It was more like, how do we help this person and keep them from doing what they're going to do, mm-hmm. right? And then it has a little bit of a twist to it. But anyway, I did enjoy the seasons that I watched. It's okay, but I didn't, like... I'm not a huge Buffy fan, but I'm also not the demographic, right? Like, I was a little bit too old for the teen demographic, and I'm not a male, so what were your memories of it?
Okay.
Okay. Let's get into it.
I watched this show from the time it came out. I went through all 7 seasons. The first 5 were on the WB, which is now the CW. Right. The last 2 were on UPN. Mm-hmm. Did not matter. I switched with Buffy. I remember watching the first episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and it had Sarah Michelle Gellar in it, who I'd never seen before, and I fell absolutely in love. Not like that. Oh my goodness. I am not someone who gets starstruck, but I was starstruck by Sarah Michelle Gellar. She was I had a huge crush on Sarah Michelle Gellar until season 3 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when Faith the Dark Slayer was introduced. That's Eliza Dushku. While I was in love with Sarah Michelle Gellar, Eliza Dushku had the raspy voice and a bit of dark edginess and danger to her, and I was like, oh, yeah, Buffy's nice, that's sweet. Give me some of that Faith. But so I had 2 major Hollywood crushes from the same show. That's funny. And sorry, Sarah Michelle Gellar, if you're listening. She subscribes. You subscribed. But yeah, so it was, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I fell in love with her. I fell in love with the show. I followed it. I thought there was a lot of highlights to this. And it's interesting because watching the episodes we watched for this podcast, I haven't seen it in a while, right? Mm-hmm. And we watched it, and it's like when you read a book and you've read like a whole series of books, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go back to read it again, and you're like, oh, the characters seem so young because I know what's going to happen. Right. Right? And they seem so young and innocent. It was like that for me because I know the finale of the show after 7 seasons, right? Mm-hmm. I know where people end up, who doesn't make it, who does but is injured, right? I know all this stuff. And so seeing them like in season 4, mm-hmm. right, where they're much younger and a lot of stuff hasn't happened to them yet, it was really interesting. And kind of nostalgic as well. And it was really kind of cool in that way. We did see, we'll get into this in a moment, but, the first 3 seasons were in high school for Buffy. Right. And then she went to college in season 4. And then through that process, she actually moves up until, by the last couple seasons, she's an adult pretty much with most of her gang. And Giles leaves because she no longer really needs a watcher, mm-hmm. and she's kind of watching younger people, mm-hmm. and so there was growth on the characters' parts. Okay. Right, and so I thought that was interesting as well. Yeah, the first seasons too, from what I can recall, because we watched one episode from season 4, and then we watched one from season 6. Right? I wish that we had watched one from season 1, I think. That would have been interesting. That's not how the dice played out mm-hmm. for us. But it was like, I remember that
they were... Sarah Michelle Gellar looks the same now as she did when she was like 14 or 15. Like, she has that same face. Right? But the other people, Allison Hannigan and Brendan, who played Xander, and I guess maybe not Charisma Carpenter, because she was beautiful too, but the two of them and Seth Green, like, they're very awkward.
Yeah.
And you buy them as very awkward teenagers to a certain extent. So by the time we came to season 4, Xander's kind of like coming out of that awkward stage. Willow's still kind of in it somewhat. And then by season 6, Willow's with Tara, Xander is with Anya, right? Yep. And they I was like, oh, Xander has like his man body. Like, he's got like more muscles, more fat, like and Willow's starting to grow her hair out, things like that. So it was kind of interesting, you're right, even in those 2 episodes, just to see that kind of snapshot of how they changed and developed. So,
and it's also interesting, right before we jump in, though, it's the other last interesting piece that we see that I want to point out when we talk about character growth is that the character of Spike, who spends the first 3 seasons as the bad guy, he's like the big bad for the first 3 seasons of this show, right? We then see him transition, and you see probably the largest character arc of anyone in this show, as by the end he ends up as a good guy who's actually sacrificing. Right? So it's a huge character arc. Again, when you see it, if I flick to a season 2 and start watching it, and Spike is like this evil monster, and I'm going, well, I know what he does at the end. Like, this is a really different... It's almost like acting like a completely different person for James Marsden.
Yeah.
And I can't think of a lot of shows that do that huge of a character arc for a villain that's that bad, and then ends up doing like the greatest sacrifice you can.
See, but to me, did you like that arc? Because to me, it's like they're adults and we're running our storyline, so let's make him a good guy. Let's get rid of Giles. Let's bring in young people. Like, we talk almost like with the real Ghostbusters, like the junior Ghostbusters are on the scene. You know what I mean?
I did, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because it actually did something to me, right? In a way, and let me explain. Of course, the whole first few seasons, the first 3 seasons, right? Buffy is in love with Angel. And Angel is the vampire with a soul, and he's romantic, and he's dark and brooding, right? Spike is the bad guy who hates both of them and just wants to kill her, and all this stuff, right? So the whole time, even after Angel leaves and gets his own show, occasionally they still get back together in each other's shows, and you have this romance, right? Then, as we go through the season, like around season 5, 6-ish, right, you have this piece where Buffy and Spike start kind of a weird relationship, almost like a casual,
they're like friends with
hooking
benefits.
Up kind of thing,
yeah.
Right? But then you see as it progresses that Spike actually has feelings for her, and by the end, in the very last season, they tried to bring Angel back, and just like many other people probably watching it, I myself found myself, and I'm a big fan of David Boreanaz, I found myself being like, get out of here, Angel. Like, you're interfering, like we've got something going on here that I'm invested in. And I think that you can even try to change the arc of a villain, but to actually get people invested in it, I think is really well done.
That's true. And I guess you're right that they did it over a long period of time.
They did.
It's not like, what's that? Once Upon a Time, where like one season the heroes would be villains.
Yeah.
And 2 episodes later they'd be back to heroes.
And you're like that's
so
fine,
obnoxious.
but you didn't earn it.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. So, let's get into the episodes we watched. The first one is Season 4, Episode 14, Goodbye, Iowa. So, just to give kind of a brief overview of the episode, they're in college. There is a group called the Initiative, and they're kind of like a government group, and Buffy is sort of working with them. And the episode opens up where somebody from the Initiative named Maggie has been killed. They don't know who's done it, and Buffy is kind of a suspect, but it turns out to be like a Frankenstein type of monster that this a Frankenstein's monster type of monster that Maggie created.
Right.
So it's part machine, part soldier,
part monster,
part vampire, and she's kind of hobbled this thing together, and she's also been giving some kind of drugs to the actual soldiers who are part of the initiative.
Right.
And now that she's gone, they're starting to get sick.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the setup. Willow and Tara are friends, and they're starting to do magic, and so Willow's kind of become a witch.
A little bit, yeah. She's interested, and she's starting to try to do magic a little bit.
Right. And then we have Riley, who is Buffy's love interest at this point.
Yes. Yep.
So, the Vulgara?
Yep.
The Vulgara or the Vulgara?
Vulgara, yep.
Okay. So the Vulgara, and she's told them not, they show up previously on, she's told them not to damage the arms of the Vulgara because they have like spikes that come out of their arms, which is kind of interesting. So
we pick up.
So that's kind of where we pick up, which was interesting to me because, as I said, I really only watched the first few seasons of this. And as you said, Steve, at that point, it was before some of the long-form storytelling.
Right.
So now we're in, we came in, you guys, really in the middle of a story.
Yeah, this was episode 14 of the season. So you're really in the middle of the season.
Yeah, and in the middle of a story as well. So it is finding this Adam Frankenstein's monster type of guy, but it's also part of this longer plot arc about the initiative and the fact that there's other people hunting vampires and monsters and not just slayers.
Yes, yep.
So that was kind of interesting to me. Riley is in my notes I have Riley is a generic Ken doll.
Yes, he really was. I'm going to be honest.
Nobody.
This is what happened, okay? They got rid of Angel because Steve Boreanaz went on to star in Angel, the show, right? The spinoff, and took Charisma Carpenter with him, who went over that show as well. And so when they switched from high school to college, they needed a new love interest. They brought Riley in, who was sort of like a plain white bread kind of, you know.
He is so generic. He's like, there's a joke on Saturday Night Live about Hallmark movies, and it's like the Chris Berenstein of...
Yeah. I think what happened was they brought him in.
Yeah.
And because Buffy keeps saying, I don't want, she just had this long relationship with this vampire. So she's like, I just want normal. So she gets this normal dude, and then I think nobody liked that. So they're like, well, he's part of an underground, army.
Yeah.
To try to make him... And he just doesn't look like he's dangerous.
No, he doesn't.
He looks like he's like Opie from next door.
He's an overcorrection.
Yeah, definitely.
That's
a good statement.
That's when you date somebody and you're like, oh, they're too passionate. And so then you date somebody else and they they have the personality of a hairbrush. Yeah. That kind of thing. That's where we are right now.
So we open up where the initiative, this Dr. Maggie has been killed by Adam, this Frankenstein's monster, and they're sort of blaming Buffy for it.
Well, they're not sure at first. And first, yes, so Riley comes to warn them, and he sees Spike there with the whole gang.
Yes, that's also something. Spike is part of the gang now.
But he's also Hostile 17.
Right.
And they've been looking for him. Yes. So he had some kind of a chip installed to correct his behavior?
Yeah.
Or to keep him from killing?
What they found out was the initiative not only kill demons, but they experiment on them. So they had captured Spike and put a chip in his head that doesn't allow him to hurt people.
Right. Also, okay, I like Allison Hannigan and other things. Mm-hmm. I don't know, and I think if I'm thinking correctly, she did not do this in the second episode we watched down the line, but she talks like a child. Her vocal tones are like, "Gosh, guys, where are we gonna go?"
Well, they had this was the first season they transitioned to college, right?
Oh my gosh.
And she had always been kind of the goody two-shoes of the group.
Yeah.
And as we saw when we looked at season 6, there was growth there.
Yeah,
they developed her into a more mature person, but here it's not happened yet.
It was just I put Willow is just too innocent though. You've been fighting vampires for 4 years. You're not going to be a little bit less golly gee willikers, you know?
Right.
So when they look at they finally find, and we also have, though, a few, like, sometimes they just talk fast, and that's not the same as being funny. It's the same issue I have with the Gilmore Girls. Just because you talk faster does not mean you're being funny. But they do have some, like, funny little verbal quips in there.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, well, I would go out and try to kill the monsters for you, but right now I'm in my yummy sushi pajamas. Right. Which just did make me laugh, because I was like, she is in yummy sushi pajamas. But they find the body of Maggie Professor Walsh, and she's been staked. And because she's been staked, that's why they suspect Buffy. Okay. Right? So the gang decides to hide. And where do they pick to hide, Steve?
They choose to hide in Xander's basement, which he lives in his mom's basement. Yeah. With his girlfriend, Anya right now, right? And so it's kind of like his college apartment is his mom's basement. So the hilarious part of this is not just them, because, I mean, a lot of times you have kids or college kids in a basement, but it's Giles, the English gentleman, who's hiding in this basement, and it's, like, obviously a bachelor pad, right?
Yeah, and that is actually the funny part. And then they show them, and they're all... Giles is on the couch, and the rest of them are all, like, in one bed. Yeah. Which was kind of funny. And then we have my favorite part of the episode, which is Willie, the bartender who talks like it's the 1940s. Hey, buddy, let me get you a drink over here. Okay, yeah. Do you want a whiskey with that? Like, oh my goodness.
One of the pieces I like that happens right before she ends up at Willie's bar is she goes to the crime scene. Yes. So there's an investigation component to this. Mm-hmm. It's not just like she's tripping into things.
Right, and then she goes to the bar because she's trying to find clues. So you're right.
And it's a crime scene because, and we didn't mention this, but one of the darker aspects of this episode is that Adam, who's the escaped monster, kills a kid.
Right, but it's because...
It's off screen, but it does happen.
No, but it happens exactly the way that Frankenstein happens. Right. And it's shot for shot like the original 1930s Frankenstein movie.
With the kid with the teeter-totter?
That the kid comes up and the kid's like picking flowers or something, and Frankenstein's monster asks like, what am I... Or it doesn't understand what's going on at that point. Right. And in the book as well... murders the child. Yeah. Later on, when it has a little bit more like sentience, it realizes what it's done, and then it's very remorseful. But in the 30s movie, it's set up exactly the same way of coming upon the child, having a conversation, and then off. It basically, this guy Adam asks this kid, "What am I?" And the kid says, "You're a monster." And he says, "What are you?" And the kid says, "I'm a boy." Mm-hmm. Right? And then he kills him because he's a monster.
He kills him and mutilates him. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of dark. It's mentioned. Of course, they're not, especially because this is network TV at the time, right? Yeah. But even the concept of killing a child, I thought was dark.
Yeah, it was, but I think it's specifically because it was supposed to be like Frankenstein
monster.
But but then we also have we cut away, and Willow and Tara are doing some spells.
Yeah, they're doing a spell.
Willow, at this point, like you said, there's some growth, but she's in this weird in-between point. So she's not with Tara yet, so she's kind of flirting, but not really. And she's trying to be witchy, but also innocent. It didn't work for me.
Yeah, well, Willow had spent most of her character arc, as like the weird, goofy, innocent girl. Yeah. Then there was like some will they, won't they with Xander with her. And then she met Seth Green. Right. And dated him, and he was like the musician. Right. And ended up being a werewolf. Right.
But he was also weird and
now
quirky
she's
as well.
Like gone to college, and she's like, I think maybe I'm gay. Yeah. And so now this is where she's at with Tara.
But my point, the way that she's acting, the actress's choices, or the director's choices for... Because like I said, I like Allison Hannigan a lot. I like her in other things. I think she's great in How I Met Your Mother. They're calling Thespia, who I looked up. Thespia, they're like, the goddess of the night. And I'm like, no, she was a naiad daughter of a river god.
So not even really a goddess.
No, and then they're like, the spell didn't work. And I'm like, yeah, probably because Thesby is not who you're saying, but
right.
It's just a name to throw in there.
Also, you're not great witches. And also, the spell was supposed to locate, like, a monster by breed.
Yeah.
And Adam's made of, like, 9 different things.
Which is really why the spell doesn't work, yeah. So then we have, we cut to Buffy and Xander, and they're breaking into...
No, we left off at Willie's bar.
So we have a scene at Willie's bar. The boyfriend comes in, and finally he has some personality. Unfortunately, that's because he's sick.
Yeah, and he almost shoots an old lady.
Yeah, he almost shoots an old lady, and then later on he roughs up Buffy a little bit.
Oh, and she grabs the bartender, kind of punches him so that people are like, oh, he's not snitching. And then she says, spell it out for me. I feel an attack of dumb blonde coming on.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting, like you said, kind of quips here and there.
Yeah, they have little things like this. Like later when they're in the warehouse and they're at the Initiatives location, and Buffy and Xander are going through, and he's like, oh, wow, this place is amazing. And she's like, yeah. And he goes, oh, I get it. Can I have sex with Riley too now? Which was a weird comment to me.
Yeah.
But his point was like, if I sleep with that guy, can I be part of this? So essentially she finds out that Maggie wanted her dead. Right. And this is Project 314 that escaped. And he then is there at the Ashburn.
Yeah, he breaks into the headquarters and basically kicks their butt.
And he puts in these little 3x5 floppy discs into himself, and he says, I wanted to learn more about me, so I came home. And he starts basically repeating whatever the information is that's in this disc, because he is part computer robot, part and he's part demon man and machine, taught to think and feel. Then he says that the soldiers like Riley were fed chemicals, that they're brothers basically, and he's like, I'm not your brother. And Buffy looks at him like, now she's not sure who this guy is.
Right.
But he's the one that staked the doctor. They have an epic fight.
He kills another scientist and then stabs Riley.
Yeah. And then Buffy's thrown across the room. She tries to help her boyfriend. And that's... Adam escapes, and that's where we end the episode. Well, we ended the episode with Spike being thrown out of the bar.
Right, because he gets beat up by demons because he can't fight anybody anymore.
Right. And that's the little tag just kind of wrapping up where Spike is, because he's in this weird spot that he doesn't fit in with them, but he also doesn't quite fit in with the humans.
He's almost, at this point, I mean, he's almost like an attack dog that's been leashed.
Yeah, right? That's a good way to put it.
He's, and so... it's pretty. That's a weird spot for him to be in, but this actually sets up kind of his turn a little bit. So I put as my last thing for this episode, I forgot how stupid Buffy is when it comes to men.
Well, that's the whole thing, yeah.
And I was like, Riley, come on, we can't. So then we jumped.
Yeah.
We jumped to season 6, episode 7, and we chose this specifically, Once More with Feeling, because it's the musical episode.
Yes! Now, here's the thing, to give some background, because, again, it's some long-form storytelling. Basically, Buffy died.
Yes.
They did a ritual to bring her back.
Yep.
When they did that, they ripped her out of heaven.
Right.
They didn't really know that that's what they were doing. They thought that they were saving her, but really she was ripped out of heaven. In the meantime, Xander and Anya are now planning on getting married.
Yep.
Willow is with Tara, but she's becoming darker. She's getting addicted to magic.
Yeah.
And she just had put a spell on Tara to make her forget a fight that they had.
Yep.
So when we open here...
Oh, and Dawn, the little sister who's here now...
Yes.
...is a klepto.
Oh, that's right.
And keeps stealing stuff.
So the thing is that basically, kind of the premise of the episode, besides the singing and dancing, the premise of the episode is really that everybody right now has a secret, and they don't want everybody else to know.
Yeah, that they're hiding from people.
Xander and
Spike
Anya,
is in love with Buffy.
But Spike is in love with Buffy, but she doesn't know. They don't know that she kind of wishes she was back in heaven, and now she's afraid she won't be able to go back.
Yeah.
Xander and Anya are both worried about getting married. Dawn's a klepto.
Yeah.
And Giles is just trying to hold everybody together.
Right.
Basically. So all of these secrets are kind of going on in the air, or unspoken rather. And then we get into the first song.
Yeah, so also they have an intro that's old school, almost like Bewitched.
Yes, that's true.
But the first song is Buffy sings Going Through the Motions as she kills vampires in the cemetery.
Yes.
It's a great song.
It's a great song, and it was hilarious.
And the vampires and the demons in the cemetery she's killing do a dance number as she's killing them, too.
And then she cuts free this hot guy, and he's like, how can I ever? And she's like, whatever. Yeah. And she just walks away.
And the point being, it's supposed to be showing how, because she was like in this perfect place and got ripped out, being here is almost like hell. And so she's just like, nothing means anything to her. So it's just like she's kind of on autopilot. Yeah,
and also it's kind of a nod as well by season 6, the middle of season 6, that this is old hat for the audience too. Okay, right. Buffy's killing more vampires. Yeah. Like, let's mix it up. So then we cut to, they're all hanging out in the magic shop and kind of bored. And Buffy goes, hey, anything different been going on? And they're all like, no. And she goes, so, did any of you find yourselves bursting into song and dance?
And they're all like, yeah, which is hilarious.
They're like,
because
that happened to you?
It's at this point, very early in the show, you realize that they're aware of most musicals don't acknowledge that happened.
And that's the thing that made me really laugh, because I did not remember this episode. I just remembered the idea of the episode. And I didn't know that they knew that they were singing and dancing. So when she acknowledges that, and they're all like, that happened to you too? Oh my goodness. Yeah, we were doing that this morning at breakfast. I was dying. I was dying. It was really, really funny. Because you're right. They could have done one where they didn't acknowledge it at all, you know?
Yeah.
Then they sing this second song called I've Got a Theory.
Right, because they're like, well, something must be behind it, a demon or something.
And Giles has kind of the best theory that it's like a singing, dancing demon, which to me was interesting because there are these like old stories of like dance attacks, like where people would just start dancing until they dropped, until they passed out or they fainted, and it was at the time put down to like witchcraft or demon possession. It was probably hysteria, or mania, really. But I thought that was funny. But then really the funniest part is Anya, who's like, I've got a theory. And they all turn to her and she sings her verse and it's all about bunnies.
It's about bunnies because Anya's a vengeance demon. And they found out at one point the only thing she's scared of is rabbits.
And she's like, and what's with all the carrots? And but what's hilarious is that they're doing this. It is really, truly like, it's like a musical number from Rent, where people are all singing different strains of their song, and then at times they come together, and they're coming together, and then the song shifts to be like, anything we face, we can face together. But Anya's still worried about the bunnies.
Yes.
And so it's kind of funny.
Then they look out, they go, is it just us? And Buffy looks out and the whole town is singing.
Yes, and this guy's like, they got the mustard out, and he's singing about the dry cleaners across the street. And it's a whole scene in the street, straight out of like Oklahoma, where they're all like singing and dancing in unison, and oh, it's just so funny. So they're trying to figure all this out, and Dawn comes in and she's like, you'll never believe what happened at school. And they're like, were people singing and dancing? And she's like, yeah, I sing a song about math.
Yeah.
I wish I had seen that.
Yeah.
I wish that they had put that in there.
Yeah, it was funny. And then Willow and Tara go back to the house to look for books, which is code for we want to like make out.
Yeah.
And they get there and they sing a love ballad.
Yeah, they go to
I'm Under Your Spell.
They go through the park to their house. Yeah. So they have a love duet, as Steve said, a love ballad together. And my favorite line from this song is, I'm going to spread out beneath my willow tree.
Yeah, that Tara says.
And then there's implied...
We're going to have to bleep you. You're getting kind of graphic now.
There's implied sexual activity activities were going on during the song.
I thought that was a dance number.
No, it was not a dance number. And then we cut back to the shop, and Dawn says, "Oh, that's romantic." And they're all like, "No, it's not."
We see a random guy dance to death.
Yes.
So now we know that there's negative effects to the dancing.
He tap dances until he spontaneously combusts.
Yes.
And then we, I will say this, it was a little bit choppy, but it's trying to do a number of different genres of musical styles, so it wasn't all big Broadway numbers.
And it's merging a lot of musical numbers into one episode.
Yeah, it was, because we cut then to the next day, after the tap dancing man was at night. Now we have Xander and Anya, and I'll Never Tell.
Yeah, they sing I'll Never Tell, which is them waking up in the morning. Mm-hmm. And it's about how they love one another, but they each have a secret. And it's that they're scared of marriage coming up.
Yeah, and also that there are things that annoy them about the other person.
Right. It's your basic, romantic couple comedy kind of thing.
And Anya's like, that's the man I plan to entangle?
Yeah. And you know what I noticed here, and I want to mention it because you mentioned this earlier in our facts, right? Which is in the higher up seasons, the later seasons, you were like, oh, Xander's got his man body, right? And he does here, but they dress him in goofy clothes to try to cover the fact that he's buffed out a little bit.
Yeah,
because they're still trying to use him as comedy relief a little bit.
Yeah, and here they're in silky pajamas.
Yeah, but even later when it shows the group going through the street, he's in a weird Hawaiian shirt and weird pants.
Yeah.
That they're trying to and they're very baggy to kind of cover his...
Yeah, the silk pajamas are too.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting because, I'm sure he likely played a teenager in his 20s, but now he's in his, probably later 20s, I'm guessing, maybe even 30, and you're thicker at that point.
Right.
That's just how life goes.
But also they had to keep that allure because part of the comedy of that couple is that he was the geeky twerp, and she's kind of a smoke show.
Yeah.
She's got a real nice body on her for a demon, of course, right? But she's supposed to be, sort of way out of his league.
Yeah, which is always the trope on every TV show, and it annoys me, but that's okay.
Right. Well, this was done before Big Bang Theory.
That's true.
So Buffy checks in with Spike. She kind of drops in on Spike to see if he has any info, because being a vampire, Spike still has the underground info. Mm-hmm. And Spike's like, besides all the dancing, and she's like, oh, you know that too? And he's like, yeah, but I seem to be immune. And then he goes directly into a song.
Yeah.
And he sings Let Me Rest in Peace.
Yeah. So I just did the math. Xander, when the show started, was 26.
So he's 33.
So he's 32, 33.
32 maybe.
Sarah Michelle Gellar was 20 when the show started. And Allison Hannigan would have been 74. So, hang on.
23 when it
23 when it started, which is interesting because she played... Well, she always plays
she's
young.
29, yeah.
Yeah.
But she's 4 years older than Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Did she do American Pie after this?
I think the first one might have been during. Yeah, but she had been in here already.
She plays young and innocent in that, too. I mean, they're 18, supposedly, but...
Sarah Michelle Gellar I knew because she's 5 months older than me. She was born the same year as I was.
That also... I have a thing about, when they cast people in their 20s to play people in their teens, and on the one hand, they can do more because, if they were really 14, 15, high school sophomores are, you can't have certain storylines with sex or violence or drug use, whatever, right? And also there would be rules about filming and how many hours you can do and stuff. But at the same time, I also think this is one of the things that does put pressure on kids because they think that they should look a certain way or act a certain way. And 15-year-olds don't look like that. They're 20s,
right?
Same thing with Beverly Hills.
What was your thought of Let Me Rest in Peace with Spike?
I thought he had a really good voice.
I was going to say that. James Marsden could actually sing really well.
Yeah, and I also thought it was cool that they had these different genres because his song is more like a rock.
It's like a rock ballad.
Yeah, and the one between Willow and Tara was more like a ballad, and more like a soft soft rock.
And
pop.
the one between the couple was more like a Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers kind of thing.
Yes, where they were doing tap dancing together and stuff. So I thought it was kind of cool. We then come to with okay. Then this is my favorite piece of the whole show. Dawn goes, "Does anybody even notice?"
And she gets kidnapped. Yes.
She started singing, "Does anybody even notice? Does anybody even care?" And in the middle of saying care, she gets kidnapped. And it was hysterical because you're just expecting another musical number.
Right.
This time, like the sad solo piece. And oh my goodness, it did make me laugh. The tap dancing demon does this number called Dance a While, and it's a lot more jazzy.
Yes. And so Dawn meets the demon first.
Yes.
And apparently he mentions she summoned him, but we don't know how.
Yeah.
The demon's interesting because the makeup job's not bad. And I really thought it was cool that they put him in like a zoot suit.
Yeah, because he's like
because
he's
musical, jazzy entertainment guy.
And you're right that you really, other than the guy who exploded from tap dancing, mostly nothing bad has happened.
Right.
But these guys are the masks that they have on his like demon helpers are weird.
They look like ventriloquist dummies.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
It's creepy. In kind of a good way. So, he wants her to dance a while and be his queen, and then we have this thing where Giles is singing something, Tara is singing something, because Giles is basically kind of worried that they're all growing up and moving past, and he wants to keep the group together. Tara realizes that Willow erased her memory.
Yeah, Giles is training with Buffy,
right.
And he sings Standing in the Way. Because his fear, he doesn't realize what's wrong with Buffy, but he knows something's wrong. Mm-hmm. And he feels that having always been her teacher, that now she's relying on him to do stuff instead of taking the reins herself. Mm. So he thinks like he's being a crutch to her. Yeah. Which he kind of is, and it's actually not long after this episode that Giles leaves.
Yeah, and then they have my other favorite line where they go, "Buffy, Dawn's in trouble." And she goes, "Dawn's in trouble? Must be Tuesday."
Yeah. I put that down too.
And didn't this show air on Tuesday? Like, isn't that part of the joke?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, the first two seasons were Mondays, and then it was Tuesdays the whole rest of the show.
A little meta joke there.
Yep.
And then Buffy and Spike duet, "I Will Walk Through Fire."
Yeah, I Will Walk Through the Fire is a great song.
Which was a really good song.
Mm-hmm.
And then she does this dance in front of the demon, and and this is a term I learned from Glee, there's a lot of choreography going on. Meaning, instead of just choreography, she is dancing, but she's whipping her hair all over the place. There's a lot of, like, movement with the hair.
Yeah.
She's not as good of a dancer as the girl who plays Dawn.
Michelle Trachtenberg, I was going to say that. When she dances with the demon earlier, she's got some dancing chops.
Yeah.
There's some ballet in there.
Yeah.
And she's got... At one point, she swings her hips, and I was like, whoa! I was like, nicely done.
Sarah Michelle Gellar moves a little bit, like, very clipped.
Yeah.
And she learned the choreography, and I guess she kind of learned it in a certain way because that's the character. So I don't know if she can dance better than is here.
But this screams that Michelle Trachtenberg has dance background.
Yeah, she definitely does. Oh, she definitely does. And I will say, too, Sarah Michelle Gellar and the girl who plays Tara, they both have nice voices as well.
Yes.
Pretty nice voices. So that was kind of cool, too, to see different people, branching out and stuff like that. So the demon is like, well, now that all your... Oh, so the demon says that Dawn summoned him because she has the necklace.
Yeah. The song that Sarah Michelle, that Buffy dances to is Give Me Something to Sing About.
Yes.
Which is a really good song, too. And it goes from, like, slow ballad to, like, and it, like, upbeats. It's kind of an interesting song.
Yep. And we find out that basically Dawn stole this necklace from the shop. And that Xander was the one who accidentally summoned this demon because he wanted to have fun and dancing at the wedding.
He thought singing and dancing would be good for everybody to blow off steam.
Yeah. And the demon says, well, he doesn't want Xander to come to his kingdom with him.
Yeah, Xander goes, do I have to be your wife now?
Yeah. And the demon's like, hard pass.
He's like, I'll let you off on that one this time.
But he's basically like, well, now that all your... Because Buffy, during her song... So every time there's a song, we should have mentioned... Every time that there's a song, secrets somehow get revealed.
Right.
So, like, Xander and Anya's duet is they're worried about the wedding and they're worried about getting married, and so some of their secrets of I'll never tell do come out. And then Tara finds out that Willow lied to her basically by something that Dawn said.
Right.
But then her revelation is in a song. And then here, Buffy's like, I was ripped out of heaven and now I'll have to go into hell. And so now they kind of realize what she's been dealing with.
And they realize, like, you can see it in Willow's... Alyson Hannigan does a phenomenal job here when you talk about acting without dialogue. Mm-hmm. Because her face just looks...
Stricken.
It looks stricken because well, she did the spell.
Right.
Right? But she realizes that they were... A, trying to help Buffy, but B, helping themselves because they needed a champion.
Yeah.
And they ripped her out of heaven.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they really did this to her. But it's interesting, the only two songs that it seems like secrets aren't conveyed are when Spike is singing about how he loves Buffy and when Giles is saying that he's standing in Buffy's way. Both times Buffy's like, what, did you say something? But it becomes apparent I think she's trying to ignore them.
Yeah.
Because everyone else understands what's happening.
It's pretty clear that she, in both times, that's a good observation. And both times, I think she did hear, and she's like, I'm not dealing with that at the moment. Especially Spike's feelings, like, no, that's not going to happen at this point.
So they all end in a huge ballad of the whole group singing the song "Where Do We Go From Here?"
And the demon goes, "Now that all your secrets are out, I can leave," and just disappears into a whirlwind.
He just pieces out.
Yeah. So there is no monster killing in this episode. And then after he leaves, Spike starts singing with them, and then he's like, no. And he goes.
He's like, I'm out.
And then Buffy follows him, and they kind of have a chat, but nothing's really resolved. So it is interesting.
It ends with her grabbing him and going into a tonguey kiss.
Yeah.
Like, she really goes into
Well, it's supposed to be like, and then they end it like an old-time movie.
Right.
Which is how a lot of those would end. But it's clear, like, this is more the setup, and it's going to be the impetus for the rest of the season.
That's why I liked this. Most musical episodes, when a show has a musical episode, right? Mm-hmm. It's usually a standalone.
Yeah.
This really brings a lot of secrets out that have been boiling through this season, and also, like, ignites a lot of plot.
Yeah, and to me it was interesting because, I don't think I've ever seen season 6.
Okay.
So, because I thought the whole thing of her dying, I heard about it, and I was like, that sounds dumb. So, I don't think I've ever seen it. And to me, you get a lot of the information from this episode. And you're right, it's not wasted.
Yeah.
It's not wasted. So, those were the 2 episodes that we watched. Pretty interesting.
Watch them if you haven't before. I tell you, the other thing is, too, there wasn't a bad song in that episode. There's not a song I disliked.
No, there really wasn't. And nothing also got stuck in my head to an annoying degree either, which is nice. I really liked the Walking Through Fire song that the 2 of them did. I thought that was really, really fun. So, how was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show, received at the time that it came out?
It was actually received really well.
Yeah, this is one of those rare things, if I'm recalling correctly, it was like a fan with critics and viewers.
I mean, ratings-wise, it in its highest rating, it rated about 120 viewership rank. Now, that was about 5.1 million.
But it would have been...
Which is good for the WB.
Right.
That was not a major network at the time, right? And so it really did do pretty well. It had 144 episodes.
It was kind of a flagship show for them, right?
Really was. I mean, they spread off Angel from there, and there was a number of other.
Dollhouse, which was Liza Dushku, not a sequel or anything, but also that was a Joss Whedon too.
Yeah, I believe it was. Yeah. But it also there was a lot of like Buffyverse, like a lot of comics, a lot of books that were written off of this, things like that, and so that really did split off of it. They did get some awards,
Okay.
right? There was an Emmy Award nomination in '99 for the episode Hush, which we did not watch, but it's one that I would mention as well, because it featured an extended sequence with no dialogue.
Oh, interesting.
There was like a demon or something that made it so no one could talk.
Oh, okay.
And so everything is very physical and very emotive.
Yeah.
And it got an Emmy nod for that. The 2001 episode The Body was filmed with no musical score.
Oh.
It was just diegetic music. Mm-hmm. And it was nominated for a Nebula Award. And so that was pretty good. In the end, it was nominated for an Emmy and a Golden Globes. Buffy the Vampire Slayer in total won 3 Emmys, which is not bad for its genre. However, a lot of people felt like the Emmys snubbed them because of the genre.
Because it was a teen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it resulted in so much outrage from TV critics, not just viewers, that there was a decision done by the Academy that after they had gone off this, after Buffy the Vampire Slayer had ended, in 2003, the Emmy Academy held a honor tribute for the series.
Oh, okay.
To kind of like acknowledge that maybe they had snubbed it.
Right.
And so they did kind of like this honor thing.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is that in terms of like teen shows, from what I can kind of recall, this is one of the first, like there were a few shows that were like very soapy. Like
Yes.
Beverly Hills 90210, and later Melrose Place, which wasn't teens, but was more like new adult, like early 20s, right? But this kind of like, when I asked you before, was it it was like a seminal show for the WB.
Yeah.
And then UPN, and then eventually they merged to be the CW,
Yeah.
right? But the WB and UPN, or the WB and later CW, really, this is kind of like their bread and butter now. They still do this kind of teen show.
There would be, if it weren't for the to me, and I was just going to say this, if it weren't for the success of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there would have been no Vampire Diaries.
Right.
There would have been no Originals, which is a spin-off of that. No Teen Wolf. None of that stuff would have.
But other stuff too, Steve. Like Dawson's Creek came after this.
Yeah.
A year after. And once they were paired together, I think that, from what I can recall, that's when they kind of both really took off.
Uh-huh.
Pretty Little Liars.
Yeah.
Like, those are shows that kind of have this same, like, they're for teens, so they're a little bit darker, right? And you have, like, Gossip Girl, things like that, where that's really what the CW is known for now. And this is, I think you're right. If they hadn't had this show, first of all, I don't know that the network would have survived without this show.
Right.
Because even though, as you said, it was 120th, but for them it was like number 1 or 2 all the time. Because it was a smaller, newer, like, startup little network. So it's kind of interesting the way that kind of panned out. So what do we think of it?
All right, well, you go first, because I have strong feelings. So.
I know you have strong feelings about this. Okay. I'm going to make Steve so mad. I'm sorry. Having said all of that, in terms of like its importance, I think that it did kind of redefine what a teenage show could be. Is it my favorite show? No. It's not my favorite show. Am I going to go and watch more of these? No, I'm sure not. If I would, Steve just threw something across the room. Not at me, just to be kind of clear. If I allowed it, Steve would, like, we would watch this entire series. If I were like, let's watch all of Buffy, you'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
And we could start from day one.
I'd be like, because we'd be better people for it.
It's a lot of repetition. It's the same as I felt about Scooby-Doo. It's just a lot of repetition. Let's go fight the monster. Like, same old thing. And she sings in the graveyard. I do think, as I said, I find Sarah Michelle Gellar a tiny bit bland. I find David Boreanaz in this show a tiny bit bland. But we didn't watch that part. And it's also difficult because we are only getting 2 episodes. It's like a little snippet.
Right.
You know? So, it's okay. It's good for what it is. It's not my favorite. I'm gonna go a 7 on this. I think it's good. It's, it's alright. It's fun for Halloween to watch some of them, but it's not my super favorite. But Little House on the Prairie is my super favorite. I think I only gave that like an 8.
Yeah, so. This is a 10. It's an
you
easy
didn't You didn't even give Quantum Leap a 10.
It's a 10. This is life-changing. I mean, I remember this is life-changing. I sat there while you spewed out terrible garbage about this. So you listen to me now.
Stop it.
This is a great show. It has great actors. It was impactful. It was emotional. It had monsters. It had some sci-fi added into it. There was a musical episode, as we discussed. And it had character arc throughout the 7 seasons. It spun off things. It really propelled the network, as we mentioned. It's just well done. Okay. Well done, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay. I agree with you. I think it's interesting the way that it's genre bending, and there are some parts of it that I like. It's just overall it's not for me, but a lot of people love it.
Right.
And if you love it, you love it. And if you have never seen it, I do think that it's worth watching because you might love it. And as I said, I do think it's a great one to watch during Halloween. So if you are like, hey, you know what? I never actually watched any of Buffy. That one bypassed me somehow.
Right.
Go back and check it out.
Yeah.
Because you might really love the show. And I would say start at the beginning because then you get the whole lore and the character arcs and all that. We ended up in the middle because we've seen that part before, but I would recommend to people that start at the beginning.
Definitely.
So
yeah. 8.5 bats out of 10.
Oh, we cut a bat in half. I don't like that.
Yeah, it's fine.
A bat and 1 winged bat. 8.5, that's not bad.
It's not bad.
8.5 for Buffy. Unfortunately, 1 out of 5 for the wax lips.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, those were not great.
They were not great. I can't recommend doing anything with the wax lips but taking some funny photos.
Yeah. Now, we don't have a What Will Steve Watch because we're watching a movie next.
That is correct. So, that'll actually be coming up next. And until then, we'll see you guys later.
I'm Steve.
I'm Megan. Have a great week, everybody. Have a happy Halloween. Bye-bye.